I came back to save her from the pain of loving me, but what I really did was erase the life I couldn't and oppose. To live without. That was the unforgivable arithmetic of my time travel. The shift was brutal, a wrenching physical jolt rather than a soft dream. Lucas Marin, 34, woke up on the unforgiving steel bench in Prospect Park. The rain was sharp and cold on July 18, 2018. 6 years of loneliness collapsed into a single, overwhelming moment of regret. He checked his wrist. No watch, but the muscle memory was precise. It was 3 p.m., 2 hours until the moment he had destroyed everything. In his previous life, the future he desperately needed to rewrite, he had delivered the goodbye coldly, logically. He convinced himself that Rose Callahan deserved stability, not the chaos he brought. His exit had been clean, absolute, built for her immediate protection and his eventual solitary devastation. But the silence that followed had been a constant scream. He carried the weight of the house they never built, the children they never named, the silence of a life that was exclusively his fault. I didn't oppose. I need to change the decision, he thought, gripping the edge of the bench. I needed to change the execution. He needed to inflict less emotional damage. He needed to make the goodbye gentle, sincere, fueled by love, not by icy detachment. That was the only variable he could control, the final expression of his sacrifice. He stood up, his suit jacket feeling far too heavy for the humid Brooklyn air. The past felt vivid, dangerously close, and utterly fragile. He had just over an hour to travel downtown to the studio where Rose was painting, where she was waiting for him, unaware of the fracture about to happen. If he left her with love, she would heal quickly. She would find someone stable. She would be safe. He wouldn't and oppose. He'd have to live with the knowledge that his final act was cruelty. Lucas started walking toward the subway entrance, every step a calculation against fate. He rehearsed the lines in his head. No tears, no promises. Just a final, perfect moment of connection. A kiss that would serve as both farewell and absolution. It was the only way to safeguard her happiness. He never considered that safeguarding her happiness meant erasing the only version of him that she would ever remember. Lucas Marin awoke to the persistent, low hum of a reality he had tried and failed to escape. His eyes, usually clouded with the melancholic gaze of a man who had seen too much loss, scanned the ceiling of the small apartment. It was the same apartment he remembered from 7 years prior, the one he had shared briefly with Rose Callahan before his original, disastrous departure. He was 34 again, trapped in the precise 24 hours that had birthed his profound, lifelong regret. He moved slowly, pulling on the elegant, yet perceptibly worn, clothes that characterized his future self. A subtle discord in this younger setting. His dark hair was automatically slicked back, a ritual of control against the chaos of his purpose. His motivation was fixed, carved into the stone of 7 years of loneliness. He had to leave Rose again, but this time, he would do it right. His original exit had been cold, clinical, designed to shock her into moving on quickly. It had failed. Rose had suffered for years, dragging herself through the wreckage of his abandonment until she finally found stability. Lucas believed the pain she endured was a direct result of his cruelty. He returned convinced that the sacrifice, his absence, was necessary, but the execution needed refinement. He would offer solace, a softer cut, ensuring the scar would heal clean. His goodbye would be a sincere gesture of protection, not a desperate escape. He found Rose in the small, cluttered sunroom, sunlight catching the intense green of her eyes and turning her short red hair into a halo of copper. She was bent over a large canvas, a smear of burgundy paint already dusting her fingers. She was 32, vibrant, and utterly unaware that the man standing behind her carried the complete history of their shared life, including its termination. "Rose," he said. The sound of her name felt heavy on his tongue, a memory and a promise being broken simultaneously. She turned, her artistic concentration dissolving into a smile that ripped through Lucas's carefully constructed resolve. That smile. He had erased it from his life, but it had always been the memory he cherished most. He approached her, ignoring the rising dread that warred with his conviction. He noted the casual, messy style that defined her, the slight trace of oil paint on the collar of her shirt. "You're leaving early," she observed, her tone flat, already sensing the inevitable distance that always plagued their early mornings. "I am," Lucas confirmed, his voice steady. He reached out, not to pack or turn away, but to cup her cheek, feeling the soft warmth of her skin under his thumb. This was the pivotal moment. In the original timeline, he had pulled back, offered a vague excuse about his career, and walked out the door without a touch. Now he leaned in. His lips met hers. The kiss was everything the original departure was not. Slow, deep, permeated with the regret of 1,000 futures he would never live. It was an apology whispered across time, a sincere declaration of love that he was using as a weapon against himself. He kissed her goodbye, not coldly, but with agonizing, protective tenderness. The instant his lips separated from hers, the quiet fabric of the past tore. The world did not shift violently, but subtly, chillingly. A light, the warm, nostalgic amber light of the sunroom, flickered. Lucas felt it first in his mind. A specific memory, one he treasured above all others, began to dissolve. It was the memory of the day they stood together in the half-finished shell of their future home. A small, coastal bungalow they had designed, planning where the easel would go and where the books would stack. He had held Rose up against a dusty window frame, laughing, promising her forever. That memory, the smell of fresh sawdust, the sound of their shared laughter, the specific angle of the afternoon sun, turned grainy. It crumbled into mental dust, a flash of white noise obliterating the sensory detail. Lucas staggered back a step, gripping the doorframe. The loss was immediate and profound, not just of the memory, but of the reality it represented. Rose watched him, confused by his sudden pallor. "Lucas? What is it?" He couldn't answer. He was frantically checking the archive of his mind. The bungalow was gone, not merely suppressed, but excised from the timeline. His sincere goodbye, his protective gesture, had somehow authenticated the ending, granting the timeline permission to jettison their shared future entirely. He reached for another anchor. The memory of Nora, his sister, congratulating them on their first anniversary, teasing Rose about the mess she made in the kitchen. That memory, too, felt thin, distant like a story he had read, not lived. The calm of the morning was shattered. The soft atmosphere transitioned abruptly into the frantic urgency of a man watching his reality collapse. "I have to go," Lucas choked out, the words raw and involuntary. He needed to find evidence of the change, needed to see if the world outside the apartment had accepted his sacrifice. He ran from the apartment, leaving Rose alone and deeply unsettled. A far better emotional state than the devastation he had caused the first time. Yes, but at what cost? He drove through the city, recognizing the streets from his earlier life, but observing subtle, jarring alterations. The small coffee shop where he and Rose used to meet had a different awning. The old, familiar bookstore was now a clean, modern electronics store. These were minor changes, but they represented an accelerating erasure. He drove past the building where he had worked, the original reason he had claimed for leaving. He felt a sudden, profound disconnect. He remembered being the youngest partner at the firm, driven and successful. But now, when he searched his mental timeline for the details of that success, the memories were hollow. He recalled working there, yes, but the associated victories, the specific praise Rose had given him for his accomplishments, they were weak, translucent. Lucas realized the catastrophic truth. By making his farewell gentle, he hadn't just changed Rose's pain. He had rewritten the foundation of his own identity. The man who had been capable of building that successful life alongside Rose, the man who had loved her fiercely enough to design a home with her, was fading. That version of Lucas Marin had been contingent on a shared future that no longer existed. He pulled his car to the curb and stared blankly at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face, still young and relatively sharp at 34, seemed subtly different. His eyes held the memory of love, but the rest of him was becoming a ghost in this altered reality. A ghost who remembered a life he was currently unliving. This new reality was unstable. His initial attempt to mitigate regret had opened a dangerous temporal wound, and the timeline was rushing to fill the vacuum he created. Lucas felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The absence he had created to protect Rose was already being claimed by something else, something faster and darker. He understood now that the risk was not Rose and Apos' suffering, but the permanent loss of their history. The gentle kiss had been worse than the cold abandonment. The coldness had merely hurt her. The sincerity had erased them both. His sacrifice, meant to save her, was actually destroying the life he desperately wanted back. The safety he created for her was a future without him, built on the dust of his own erasure. Lucas stood at the threshold of the studio apartment he remembered furnishing with Rose. The space felt smaller, dimmer. Rose was inside, her hands smeared with deep ultramarine, but the vibrancy Lucas recalled was absent, replaced by a nervous energy. He tried to introduce a shared history. He mentioned the terrible date involving bad Italian food and a rainstorm, a night that had sealed their initial commitment in the erased timeline. Rose smiled politely, confused. She remembered the date, but her description was factual, lacking the crucial, shared emotional commentary that made the memory theirs. End quote. It was a terrible date, end quote. She confirmed, wiping her hands on a rag. End quote. But I met Elliot afterward, and he was quite kind about my spilled wine. End quote. Lucas felt the floor shift. Elliot Vaughn, the secondary character who now filled the supportive role Lucas had once occupied, was already integrated deeply into her life. He switched tactics. He moved to the small table where she kept her sketchbooks. He remembered a specific book filled with architectural sketches, ideas for the house they planned to build. He reached for it, fingers trembling. End quote. Where's the maroon one? End quote. Lucas asked, his voice low. End quote. The one with the floor plans for the mezzanine? End quote. Rose frowned, her eyes narrow. End quote. The mezzanine? I and Apos. V never sketched anything like that, Lucas. I prefer open floor plans. The only maroon book I have is my initial portfolio from 4 years ago. End quote. She retrieved it. Lucas opened the book. Instead of blueprints and shared dreams, he found studies of landscapes and abstract color washes. Pages that should have contained his initials woven into her drawings were blank or covered by recent, non-related work. His future was not just canceled. It was overwritten. He needed something concrete, something that existed in the physical world regardless of Rose's altered memory. He drove to the suburbs, the GPS guiding him to the coordinates he knew by heart. The stretch of highway was familiar, but the landscape was wrong. Where the quiet, overgrown lot should have been, awaiting the start of construction they had dreamed of, there was a pristine, contemporary glass office building. It had been there for at least 3 years, judging by the landscaping. The plaque outside read, Pierce Holdings, Damon's Building. The shock was physical, stealing his breath. His attempt at a gentle severance had not merely changed Rose's path. It had allowed his rival to acquire the very land upon which Lucas's dream life was supposed to be built. Lucas found Nora at her office. She was focused, the same sharp, disciplined businesswoman he always knew, but her eyes held a weariness that matched his own. He didn't end Apos. Bother with preamble. End quote. The house, Nora. The one we talked about building. Do you remember seeing the plans? The loan application? End quote. Nora set down her pen, linking her fingers on the desk. Her gaze was steady, pitying. End quote. Lucas, stop, end quote. She commanded. End quote. You came back a month ago, didn't and Apos? To you? After that phone call, after you said goodbye to Rose. End quote. End quote. I came back to fix the goodbye, end quote, he whispered. End quote. I tried to protect her, but the future is gone. The house is Damon's office building. End quote. Nora sighed, leaning back in her chair. The air in the room grew heavy, a pressure cooker of unspoken grief. End quote. Lucas, the tragedy ISN and Apos. T, that you erased the house. The tragedy is the man you erased to save her." End quote. He stared at her, waiting for the clarification that made no sense. End quote. The Lucas who built that house, who risked everything for Rose, who stayed when things got difficult. That man was developed over 3 years with Rose. End quote. Nora explained, her voice softening, but the words were razor sharp. End quote. You came back to the time before you fully became that man. You reverted to the Lucas who prioritizes safety over love. The one who runs. That kiss, that attempt at protection, it didn't in Apo's. T just erased Rose's memory of the life. It erased the emotional growth you experienced living that life. End quote. A profound silence filled the room. This was the moment of shattering realization. He wasn't in Apo's. T fighting the timeline. He was fighting a version of himself that no longer existed. A version that held the key to Rose's heart. He had stripped himself of the capacity to truly stay. End quote. So, I came back empty. End quote. Lucas stated, feeling the truth settle deep in his bones. End quote. You came back incomplete. End quote. Nora corrected. End quote. The man Rose loved hasn't and Apo's. T lived yet. And now he never will. End quote. The despair galvanized him into a final, desperate act. He needed to make Rose see the ghost of the man she loved, even if the current Lucas couldn't and Apo's. T embody him. He found Rose outside Elliot's gallery opening. She was laughing, her hand resting naturally on Damon's arm. Damon was attentive, quiet, wearing the dark suit Lucas knew symbolized ownership in this new world. Lucas pushed through the crowd, ignoring Damon's cold, possessive stare. End quote. Rose. End quote. Lucas insisted, grabbing her wrist gently. End quote. The blue ribbon. Do you remember the blue ribbon we won at the fair that time? For the ugliest dog? End quote. Rose's laughter immediately ceased. Damon moved closer, placing a heavy hand on the small of Rose's back. Rose looked at Lucas, not with confusion this time, but with a guarded sadness. End quote. Lucas, that was 7 years ago. You're talking about old history, and frankly, history you walked away from. End quote. End quote. But it was ours. Remember the inscription on the back? End quote. Lucas pleaded, ignoring Damon completely. Damon leaned in, his voice dangerously low. End quote. Rose remembers it, Lucas. But she remembers it as a childish memory, not a foundation for a future. The difference is the future you chose to deny her. End quote. Rose gently pulled her arm free from Lucas's grasp. She stepped closer to Damon, their shoulders touching, an undeniable line drawn in the sand. End quote. Please, Lucas. End quote. She said, her eyes pleading for him to stop inflicting pain. End quote. I am building something real now. Damon understands that growth requires presence, not perpetual sacrifice. End quote. She turned her attention back to Damon, a silent, powerful affirmation of her choice. Damon returned the look with a brief, victorious tilt of his head toward Lucas. Damon had won the space Lucas had foolishly cleared for him. Lucas watched them walk away, moving into the amberlit interior of the gallery, a visual echo of the memory light that had now faded for him entirely. He stood on the sidewalk, knowing that he had witnessed the final erasure. He was merely an echo, a man without the necessary past, staring at the future that belonged to someone else. The painful realization was complete. The life he wanted was not just destroyed, it was impossible. He was watching his own funeral, and the grieving party had already moved on. Lucas drove faster than the law allowed, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The memories, once vivid and warm, were now degrading, thinning out like old film stock. He needed proof that the house was real, that the life he built had been more than a delusion. He turned onto the old access road leading toward the forested land they had purchased 6 years ago. The coordinates were precise. The location was imprinted on his soul, the spot where the old oak tree stood, marking the center of their property. He stopped the car. There was the oak tree, but there was no house. The ground was overgrown, scrub grass fighting for dominance. A faded wooden sign, staked deep into the dirt, Read, Land Parcel Z, for sale. He got out of the car, the air cold and thin around him. He walked the perimeter, kicking at the earth where their foundation should have been poured, where he remembered painting the turquoise trim Rose had insisted upon. It was nothing, an empty lot. The realization hit him with physical force. He had not just forfeited his future, he had retroactively negated his past. The Lucas Marin who had saved money for this land, who had dreamt of raising a family here, that man had ceased to exist the moment Lucas changed the nature of the goodbye. He drove to Rose and Appo's studio, the need to see her, to anchor himself to the last remaining constant, overwhelming the dread. The studio lights were on. Damon's sleek black car was parked directly outside. Lucas walked in without knocking. Rose was standing by the large easels, organizing canvases. She looked peaceful, a tranquility that Lucas had never managed to give her. Damon was behind her, his posture relaxed, a hand resting lightly on the curve of her shoulder. A simple gesture of possession and belonging. Lucas's throat tightened. He tried to speak the truth, the desperate confession of a man witnessing his own erasure. Rose, he managed, I need you to remember me. Rose turned, her eyes clear and green. She smiled, polite but distant, the smile reserved for an acquaintance. Lucas, fancy seeing you here. Damon was just helping me organize. Damon nodded, a cold, measured greeting. He didn't seem threatened, only mildly irritated by the interruption. He had no memory of competing with Lucas, because in this timeline, Lucas had already lost before the fight began. Lucas looked only at Rose. We had plans, Rose. A whole life. The house, the trip to Italy, the way we used to spend Sundays by the river. It was real. Rose frowned slightly, confusion warring with pity. Lucas, I'm not sure what you're referring to. We dated briefly a long time ago, but that was years before Damon and I became serious. She paused, lowering her voice slightly, concerned. Are you okay? You sound stressed. She didn't register the pain in his voice. She didn't and Appo's. T feel the weight of the memories because they were never hers to carry in this reality. Damon stepped forward, calmly inserting himself between them. Lucas, Rose is happy now. We are building something stable. If you are having trouble accepting the past, perhaps you should talk to someone. Lucas understood. He hadn't and Appo's. T protected her from suffering. He had protected her from himself. He had delivered her safely into the arms of a man who chose consistency over complexity. A man who chose to stay. The choice Lucas made in the past created this outcome. Rose secure, Rose happy, Rose choosing the future he was absent from. He backed away, the air leaving his lungs. He had destroyed the life he wanted by trying to refine the moment of his own destruction. He walked aimlessly, finally stopping when he saw his reflection in a dark, clean window. He stared at the face staring back. The man looking back was hardened, etched with grief he couldn't and Appo's. T explained to others. This was the version of Lucas Marin that the timeline had accepted. The one who ran, who sacrificed love, who believed distance was protection. The true, final tragedy settled over him, heavier than the loss of Rose. He realized that the version of Lucas Marin who knew how to truly fight for her, the man who had learned patience and vulnerability in their shared life, that man was the one who had been erased by the soft goodbye. The Lucas standing here, hollowed out and desperate, was incapable of earning Rose back, because this version had never learned the fundamental lesson of commitment. He ended up on the residential street where Rose had lived when they first met. He saw the apartment building, dark and silent. He focused on the front entrance, a simple, heavy wooden door, the last remaining portal to his memories. He remembered crossing that threshold, a younger, brighter version of himself, carrying flowers, carrying hope. He remembered the arguments, the apologies, the late nights spent mapping out their future inside those walls. He raised his hand and reached for the knob. He tried to turn it, hoping to force the timeline back into alignment, expecting the familiar click. The door remained solid, locked, unyielding. Lucas leaned his forehead against the cold wood. He finally understood the cost of his sacrifice. He hadn't and Oppos. T just changed a consequence. He had eradicated the path. He was standing before a door he remembered opening countless times. But now, it stood closed forever, a monument to the life he had unilaterally erased. The man who held the key to this future was gone. Se que esta historia é intensa, e por isso que eu compartilho esses momentos. Se você valoriza a verdade e gosta de histórias que te fazem pensar e sentir, faça o seguinte. Considera esse inscrever no canal e comente de qual cidade você está assistindo. O melhor jeito de garantir que você não perca a próxima lição de vida. The grass grew high where the foundation should have been. Lucas stood in the empty field, the afternoon sun unforgivingly bright, highlighting the fact that there was nothing here. No porch swing, no chipped paint, no garden Rose had insisted on planting near the back window. The house, their house, the future they built was erased from the physical world. He had expected Rose to be happy. He had expected her to be safe. He had not expected this absolute void. Lucas looked down at his hand, remembering the weight of the paintbrush he used to hold, painting their kitchen wall a pale, optimistic blue. Now his hand felt light, detached. The Lucas who painted that wall, the Lucas who stood on that porch and promised Rose forever, that man was gone. He was replaced by a traveler, a ghost observing a life that belonged to another version of himself, a version that did not commit the cardinal sin of leaving. The realization settled. The protective kiss was not a save feature. It was a factory reset, and he was not included in the new setup. He walked away from the field, needing one last piece of proof that his old life was irrevocably sealed off. He drove to the district where Rose kept her studio, the narrow cobblestone street where they had shared their first quiet argument about art supplies. He parked the car, the engine sound echoing hollowly in the late afternoon. He stopped before a familiar brownstone apartment building. He knew, with the cold certainty of a man facing his execution, which door had once led to their shared life. It was the third door on the left, slightly recessed, painted a deep Bordeaux. The color Rose loved and swore was not just red. Lucas approached the door, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm against the silence. This was it, the final frame, the final choice. He lifted his hand to knock, but the knock never landed. As his knuckles drew near the surface, the wood seemed to ripple, subtly, like heat rising off asphalt. The wood was not Bordeaux. It was a pale, neutral beige, and the handle, which he remembered vividly being a heavy, antique brass, was a sterile, modern chrome. He stepped back slowly. He looked up at the windows. He knew the layout of the apartment inside, the messy art corner, the window seat overlooking the busy street, the small desk where he used to work late. Now, those memories were useless blueprints for an apartment that did not belong to him. He heard the click of a lock and the door opened. A woman stepped out, late 50s, dressed in bright, tropical colors. She was laughing into her cell phone, completely absorbed in her conversation. She walked right past Lucas without seeing him. He was invisible, a remnant. He watched her lock the beige door. He waited for a moment longer, hoping for a flicker of recognition, a shadow of the past to cling to. There was nothing. His history here had been efficiently scrubbed. Lucas turned and walked back to his car. The life he remembered, the man he once was, the man capable of receiving Rose's love, was a casualty of his own misguided protection. He drove aimlessly until the city lights blurred into streaks of amber and gray, the emotional palette of a memory fading into regret. This is where the story of Lucas Marin ends. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating realization that he successfully secured Rose's future. But in doing so, he guaranteed his own permanent exile. The moral of Lucas Marin's tragedy is stark and simple. You cannot save someone by removing yourself from their life, especially when your presence is the life they actually need. Lucas operated under the fatal assumption that his love was a threat, a liability that would eventually bring Rose pain. He believed that the grandest gesture of affection was the sacrifice of absence. He returned to the past, aiming for a cleaner break, a softer landing for her heart. He thought a kind, final kiss would be the cure. But the kiss was not an act of protection. It was an act of erasure. When Lucas chose absence, he created a vacuum. And vacuums, in matters of the heart, are always filled. Damon Pierce was simply the inevitable response to the space Lucas created. Rose needed stability, and Lucas, by constantly treating his presence as a temporary danger, proved that he was fundamentally unstable. The greatest irony is that Lucas sacrificed the best part of himself, the self that existed alongside Rose, the self that knew how to be vulnerable and strong simultaneously. When he erased his relationship with Rose, he erased the only version of himself that was whole. Do not confuse protection with desertion. Do not mistake fear for sacrifice. Love demands presence. It demands choice, day after day, through hardship and through ease. To choose to leave someone to protect them is often just choosing to protect yourself from the pain of failing them. Lucas learned, far too late, that the most painful tragedy is not losing the one you love, but actively destroying the life you loved, only to watch them thrive in the sterile reality you built for them. A reality in which you have no place, and in which you are not missed. His final lesson remains fixed in the amber glow of a time he can never recover. Love is not built on what you take away. It is built on what you stay and build. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment down below. What would your choice have been in my place? Would you have made that sacrifice? And if you enjoy surprising endings, I left another video right here beside this one. It an Apos, es a shocking story. Click there. I and Apos. LL see you in the next video.